Dear Anne, this is me, Lei. My grandfather Buddy was your favorite cousin, which makes you my distant cousin. You've always been a part of my life, and I feel the responsibility to keep your story alive and make a difference today. The war was coming to an end, but how could you have known this? After you'd already been to 2 different camps, you were brought to Bergen-Belsen, where you died at the age of 15. Dear Anne, my journey is almost at its end, and it is my first time visiting the place you died. I don't know what to expect. When you were put on a transport to Bergen-Belsen, you were on that train for 3 days, together with your sister, Auguste van Pels, and about 1,000 other women. But you were already very frail. You didn't know where you were going, and you just left your mother behind in Auschwitz. You would never see her again. When you arrived, you were forced to march 7 kilometers to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, accompanied by armed guards with dogs. While you were walking, what did you think about? Did you still have hope? Maybe you were too starved, exhausted, and traumatized to think. Maybe you just looked at the trees. After the liberation, they burned down the camp because infectious diseases were rife. There's no trace of the camp. The night you arrived, the weather took a turn for the worse.
Het stormde, het hagelde en we zaten met z'n tweeën alleen twee gezichtjes uit 2 dekens, 2 hoopjes op een klein heuveltje tegen een boom aan om zo droog mogelijk te blijven.
You met Jannie and her sister in Westerbork, then you were all transported to Auschwitz, and now you were reunited again in Bergen-Belsen.
En daar komt aangestapt 4 benen met ook 2 dekens over zich heen, ook over hun koppen. En we zien ze en we gooien alle tegelijk onze dekens terug en roepen: "Oh, wat heerlijk dat jullie er zijn." Hoe kan je nou iets heerlijk vinden midden in een concentratiekamp?
Because the camp was overcrowded, they were building tents for the new arrivals.
Toen ze bijna klaar waren, toen was er ineens een rush op al die tenten. Want iedereen zat in de regen te bibberen, te kleumen. Dus iedereen, het was alsof ze ertoe gezogen werden. Het was dus vies heet en het stonk zoals in Artis in de leeuwenkooi. Ik denk dat je je dat voor kan stellen. En we kregen die regen, die sloeg me, kletterde erop en er vielen gaten in, zo van, met water. Het kwam er niet doorheen, maar het water dat rauste erop. En het was een enorm lawaai. En bovendien was er in de tent ook al zo'n lawaai. Dus het was eigenlijk oorverdovend lawaai.
The violent storm brought down some of the heavy tents. People were injured and died. You all had to stay outdoors in the cold rain for the remainder of the night. The next day, you and Margot were moved to the overcrowded barracks, where the living conditions were horrendous. There was almost no food, diseases were rampant, and everyone was infested with lice. Fearful of infection, the guards left you and your fellow camp prisoners to fend for yourselves, which only made things worse. And then something terrible happened. Margot became seriously ill.
We were standing one day again to be counted, and we saw very far away, I remember like this direction, we saw tents.
You couldn't have known that Hanneli, your dear friend from Merwedeplein in Amsterdam, had been transported here nearly a year before you. You had been writing about her while you hid in the annex. You wrote, "Last night, just as I was falling asleep, Hanneli suddenly appeared before me. I saw her there, dressed in rags, her face thin and worn." At this point, did you ever expect to see her again?
One day a friend of mine tells me, you know, between all these women, there is your friend Anne Frank. And I don't know, I felt very crazy because I was thinking the whole time, Anne is saved. I was sure of this. So I just went near at dark and I start to call, hello, hello, something like this. And who answered me was Mrs. Van Pels. Immediately she said to me, you want Anne? And I said, yes. And then suddenly I heard somebody calling me and it was Anne. And this was awful. First thing we both were starting to cry.
You told Hanneli you had nothing to wear, nothing to eat. Maybe she could help.
And I said, maybe you come after 2 days, I will try to do something. And really, all my friends, everybody gave me a glove or a little sock and a little bread. So I came back at night with such a small package. And I saw the package over, and then I heard her crying or shouting. And I couldn't understand. So what happened? So the lady next to me, she caught the package and she ran away with it and she didn't give her anything. So I said, I will try for another time. And really, I tried another time. And this time, she caught the package. And then she said she had nobody anymore. Her sister was very, very sick already. She said, my mother is dead. And her mother really was dead at that moment, but she couldn't know.
Dear Anne, you were feeling desperate as Margot's situation deteriorated. The guards were on edge because the Allies were getting closer. No more food, no more water. Disease and starvation claimed the lives of thousands. Dead bodies were scattered everywhere. That must have been a horrifying thing to witness.
Anne had haar kleren weggegooid, want ze had geen materiaal om zich van haar luizen te bevrijden en kwam alleen gehuld in haar grijze deken, huilende bij ons. En ik kon ook niks anders doen dan haar kleren geven die ze weer aankon. En ik heb beloofd de volgende dag naar haar toe te komen, naar hun toe te komen. Want ze zei, je moet komen, Margot is zo ziek. Maar ik kon de volgende dag niet wegkomen. En het heeft zeker een dag of 4, 5 geduurd voordat ik naar haar toe gegaan ben. En toen waren ze al dood. Allebei dood. Dat was het.
Dear Anne, you died from illness and exhaustion sometime in February 1945. Only 2 months before Bergen-Belsen was liberated. My grandfather Buddy arranged this memorial stone. This is not your grave. After the liberation, the dead were buried in mass graves. Each of these hills is a grave for thousands of people. I wonder if she knew by the time where she arrived there, or by the time she saw the agony and the pain and the killing, and I wonder if Anna knew, if she at one point knew that she wouldn't survive this, and what she was thinking by then. This is where your path was brutally cut short. But as we know, it isn't where your story ends.